She was locked in a cage. No name, no clothes, no hope. Until one human wiped her tears. The outer scrapyards of Tarnis V were a dead zone. No law, no lights, no maintenance. The old refineries had shut down a decade ago, and what remained was a graveyard of twisted metal and collapsed orbital equipment. Air here stank of acid frost and burnt polymer, thick with the residue of years of reactor leaks and chemical spills. The terrain shifted underfoot, loose panels crunching over compacted waste, every step a gamble against injury or collapse. Darren Holt moved with care. His boots were fitted for traction, but even so, he scanned each step, gauging angles and support. 38 years old, ex-Navy systems tech, now working solo under a low-tier salvage permit. He wasn't here by choice. He was here because nobody else wanted the job, least of all in the unregulated zones. Tarnis V had been his fallback after leaving the Navy under what he called a quiet exit. No court-martial, no commendation. Just a voluntary discharge and a closed personnel file. Now, he hunted old heat cores and data rods in collapsed zones, selling to whoever would pay. Not a hero, not a criminal, just a man trying to stay ahead of debt. He was 3 hours into a search run. His HUD showed no radiation spikes, no live signals. The scanner on his left wrist beeped twice, metal density consistent with power casing. He adjusted course, climbing over a collapsed transport hull. That's when he saw the glint. Below, between a toppled drone hauler and a semi-buried cooling coil, a shape stood out, angular, rectangular, metallic. Not cargo, not a vehicle, a cage. He froze, narrowed his eyes. The cage was made from stripped stasis bars, reinforced with crudely welded iron. It looked like someone had repurposed old animal transport infrastructure. The welds were fresh within the last few months. Burn marks from plasma tools. A scorched lock, but still sealed. Inside, something moved. Darren stepped closer, slowly. His grip tightened on the plasma torch clipped to his belt. What he saw made him stop breathing for a moment. Curled in the corner of the cage was a woman. Bare-skinned, filthy, blue-skinned, emaciated, hair matted and long. Her arms were locked around her knees, chin buried, like she'd folded in on herself to disappear. A single strip of thermal cloth dangled from her wrist, filthy, shredded, useless. It looked like it had been tied to the cage once. No clothes, no name, no hope, just bruises and silence. Left in a cage like garbage. She looked up. Darren saw her eyes, wide, pale blue with faint rings of violet, glossy with fear and dehydration. Not feral, not empty, still aware, still alive. Her lips parted, but her voice barely made sound. The words cracked from her throat, dry and almost inaudible. Don't leave me in the dark again. Darren dropped to one knee, just outside the bars. He scanned the area. No signs of other life. No heat trails, no motion sensors tripped. The wind howled through the stacks of junked metal behind him, but here, it felt suddenly too quiet. His mind raced. She was Varellan. Fertility cast by the look, his time in the outer colonies had taught him to recognize their physiology. Engineered for beauty. That didn't make it better. It made it worse. No one legal would keep someone like this caged on Tarnis V. This wasn't detention. It was discard. She looked ready to faint. He unclipped the plasma torch, activated it with a short hiss, and touched it to the lock. The heat coil glowed red. She flinched at the sound, pressing into the corner. He spoke, calm and direct. I'm not here to hurt you. She didn't answer. Just watched. The lock dropped with a loud click. Darren pulled the door open, slowly. The woman tried to stand. Her legs buckled. She collapsed. Darren caught her before she hit the ground. Her skin was cold, unnaturally so, covered in abrasions, grime, bruises. Her weight was shockingly light. He supported her head with one hand, her back with the other, and held her close to his chest. She didn't resist. She didn't cling. She just sagged in his arms, as if too tired to feel anything more. He moved fast now. Darren crossed the yard in long, cautious strides, keeping to the shadows. His hauler was parked under a rusted lift crane, shielded from sky drones. He opened the ramp manually and stepped inside, letting the pressure lock his shut behind him. Inside the ship, the light was dim but warm. The recycled air smelled like ozone and lubricant. He laid her gently on the padded crate that served as a makeshift bunk and wrapped his jacket around her body. Her eyes flickered open. She blinked, still watching him. "Heat's coming up," he said. "You're safe." He pulled open a ration drawer, heated a protein pack, and handed it to her. She stared at it for a moment like she didn't know what it was. Then she took it with trembling hands. She ate like someone who hadn't seen real food in days. Cautious at first, then desperate. She finished it all without stopping. He offered her a hydration capsule. She took that too, slower this time. Where her hand stopped shaking, she finally spoke. Her voice was hoarse, barely audible. "Why?" Darren didn't have an easy answer. He looked at her, really looked. She wasn't just a survivor. She wasn't just discarded property. She was a person, cold, starving, humiliated, but still fighting to exist. "No one else helped," he said. "I couldn't walk away." She nodded faintly, her eyes still fixed on him. After a few seconds, she whispered, "They called me Lot 12. That's what they put on the tag." Darren sat back, let her words hang in the air. "Do you remember your real name?" he asked quietly. Her gaze drifted down. She closed her eyes. "Not yet." "That's all right," he said. "You're not a number here." She curled tighter into the jacket, pulled it close like a shield. Her breath steadied, and for the first time, her shoulders relaxed slightly. Darren didn't press her with questions. He stayed close, within reach but not looming. That night, she slept. Lightly, nervously, but she slept. Every time the ship groaned from thermal pressure or metal shift, she jolted, but he was there. Always sitting nearby, monitoring systems, checking sensors, keeping his voice low and movements careful. He didn't touch her again. He just stayed. And in the dark, sealed quiet of that junk ship cabin, the cage was already starting to become a memory. Not erased, not forgotten, but escaped. Tomorrow, they would leave Tarnis V. For now, she had warmth, a locked door, and a man who saw her as more than salvage. That was the first step. By morning, the heat grid had stabilized, and the hauler's internal systems thrummed with quiet energy. Tarnis V's sky, dull and overcast, bled a faint orange hue through the grime-coated viewport. Darren hadn't slept. He sat on the edge of a storage crate, facing the woman, watching her breathing, steady now, jacket still clutched tightly around her shoulders. He reviewed the previous day's footage from his wristband recorder, mostly terrain scans, ambient readings, and that moment, when he cracked the cage open. Her face, her voice, "Don't leave me in the dark again." It wasn't just fear. It was a memory, conditioned. He didn't know what they'd done to her, but he knew enough. Someone had locked her up, discarded her, and assumed no one would ever look twice. And if someone like him hadn't passed through, maybe no one would have. She stirred, then blinked. Her first movements were slow, cautious, her body still adjusting to warmth and stillness. She shifted upright and glanced around, not with panic but confusion. The restraint of constant surveillance or expected punishment wasn't there. The absence of pain unsettled her. Darren kept his voice calm. "You're safe. Still on the ship. You slept nearly 9 hours." Her hands instinctively tugged the jacket higher on her chest. Then she looked at him, really looked. "You stayed," she said. "I said I would." "What's this place?" "Storage hauler. Former Navy shuttle retrofitted for salvage." "It's mine." A short pause. "Name's Darren Holt, and you're aboard the Skimmer 12. She repeated it softly, testing the word. "Skimmer." He nodded. "We'll be off this moon in 20 minutes. I found a quiet refuel point 2 sectors out." She looked down at her lap, then back up. "Can I go with you?" He didn't flinch. "You don't need to ask. You already are." That silenced her. She glanced toward the exit hatch, almost like she expected someone to walk through it at any moment and drag her away. Her voice came again, quieter. "I don't remember how long I was there." Darren shifted slightly, but let her speak. "I remember the cage. I remember being pulled out sometimes. Lights, cold rooms, exams, then back in." Darren swallowed hard. "They sold you." She nodded, slowly. "Did anyone ever tell you your name?" "I had one once." She looked down at her hands. But it was taken. They removed identifiers. Gave me a number. Lot 12. The last buyer never even asked if I could speak. Darren stood and walked to the side console. From a drawer, he retrieved one of the thermal stim suits he'd stitched together from salvage, designed for insulation, flexible movement, and temporary modesty. Not much, but better than nothing. He walked back and knelt beside the bunk, offering it. It's clean. Yours if you want it. She looked at it for several seconds. Then back at him. You're not asking anything for it? No, you're not going to touch me. Not unless you ask me to. That made her blink. He didn't push. She reached out, took the suit, and turned her back to him slightly before slipping into it. Awkwardly, as though her muscles had forgotten what normal clothing felt like. When she pulled the material over her shoulders, she exhaled, small but sharp. It was the first time she'd covered herself with something of her own choice. Darren turned away until she tapped the metal edge of the bunk. I'm ready. He looked back. The suit hugged her figure tightly, insulation foam and glossy outer material clinging to her arms and legs. But she stood straighter now, more alert. The sigil tattoo above her left hip, once exposed, was now hidden. Her hair was still tangled, but her eyes looked clearer. Present. He gestured to the pilot's seat. We'll lift off, head out of orbit, find safe space before the Black Sun Guild figures out I took something they think they own. Her brow furrowed. You're not worried about them? I am. But I've been hunted before. He powered up the ship. The hauler lifted from a scrapyard without drawing alarms. He jammed all beacon signals, routine for illegal zones. The engines hummed low as they broke free from the dense atmosphere. She stared through the viewport, eyes wide as the wasteland of Tarnis V shrank behind them. How long will I stay with you? She asked. Darren didn't look away from the console. As long as you want. A pause. I don't have a name, she said. Not really. You'll remember it. When you're ready. What if I don't? He looked at her then. Then we choose a new one. She turned back to the stars. The silence between them was no longer empty. In the storage cabin, she found a cloth scrap, part of an old emergency banner, and carefully folded it into a makeshift head wrap. Her hands moved slowly, deliberately. Each motion said, I'm still here. I choose what I wear now. That night, she asked him a question without preamble. Why didn't you report me? Most would. Darren leaned back in the seat, arms crossed. Because I don't work for them. And because you're not a thing to be reported. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. Later, as the ship floated in drift mode near a dead moon, she curled up in the same bunk. But this time, she left the jacket folded neatly at the corner. She didn't hide. She slept facing the door. And Darren, for the first time in years, let himself rest. He didn't chain the hatch. He didn't lock the NAV. He didn't feel the need to keep one eye open. Because the moment she stepped onto the Skimmer 12, something had shifted. He wasn't running salvage anymore. He was saving something that mattered. The Skimmer 12 drifted quietly in low orbit around a dead satellite moon called Jorvan 6, a place forgotten even by smugglers. Its crust was dry, brittle, shattered by old mining operations that had long since gone silent. It made the perfect hiding spot. Inside the ship, lights were low. The hum of systems echoed through the walls like a distant engine room lullaby. Darren sat at the diagnostics panel, running a systems check. His fingers moved across the interface with quiet efficiency. Behind him, movement. She had emerged from the sleeping area. The makeshift stimsuit clung tightly to her form, but she walked with more stability today. Less hesitation. Her hair was now brushed, roughly but with care, done with one of the emergency kits he'd set aside, unasked. She hadn't needed to ask. She approached without speaking, looked over his shoulder. Her voice came softly. What are you scanning? Fuel decay rate. Jump drive readiness. If we get traced, we'll need to move fast. She stood quietly for a second. Are they looking for me? Yes, he said, but not with much effort. Girls like you, they treat as property. If you're missing, they assume you broke. Got scrapped. That's how they think. So they won't chase us? They might. Not because you're you. Because they don't like losing what they think they own. She looked down at her hands, paused, then asked what she hadn't dared the last 2 days. What happens if they find me? Darren didn't answer immediately. He tapped the screen once, saved the data, then turned in his chair to face her fully. If they come, we fight. Or we run. But they're not taking you back. She searched his face, as if testing for sincerity. She found no hesitation there. No lie. She sat down across from him. I think I remember something, she said. Her voice was stronger now. Controlled. He waited. A name. Not mine. A voice called it. Say Lyra. I think it was meant for me. Dare nodded. It fits you. She repeated it again, softer. Say Lyra. He didn't smile. He didn't make it a big moment. He just said, then that's who you are. She leaned back slightly. For the first time, she looked like someone beginning to return to herself. Not all at once. Not fully. But a step. He stood, walked to the storage cabinet, pulled out a fresh scent-cloth towel and a ration pack. You should wash. I'll show you the sonic chamber. It's not luxury, but it works. She followed him through the narrow corridor. He opened the stall, handed her the towel and controls, then stepped back. You're safe. Take your time. Door locks from the inside. She hesitated at the threshold, looked at him one last time. You won't look? No. She nodded and entered. The door sealed with a hiss. Darren stepped back into the common area, sat down, exhaled. Part of him expected to hear her cry, to hear her panic. But he didn't. What he heard instead, faintly through the thin alloy walls, was the sound of running water and silence. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. The question gnawed at the edge of his mind. What now? He didn't plan for this. He never planned for anything beyond survival, routine trade. The Navy had taught him to follow protocol, to hold the line. And after his discharge, he'd avoided every entanglement, every cause. And now a cause was living in his ship. When the bathroom door finally hissed open, he looked up. Lyra stepped out, wrapped in the towel, her damp hair slicked back over her shoulders. Her eyes looked clearer, her posture firmer. I left the STEM suit inside, she said. It needs repair. I'll patch it. She moved past him, sat in the co-pilot's seat. Her skin was still flushed from the warmth of the wash, but her voice was neutral now, almost calm. You didn't ask what they did to me. Darren didn't move. You don't owe me that. I want to say it. Just once. Out loud. He looked at her. Then I'll listen. She stared ahead, out the viewport. The broken curve of Jorvin. 6 cast deep shadows across space. She didn't cry. Her voice didn't shake. She just told a plane. They used me for testing. Hormonal sequencing. Breeding compatibility. Nothing invasive at first. But later, it changed. I fought. They punished me. Then I was sold to someone else. He didn't want children. He wanted obedience. I stayed in a cage after that. Darren didn't speak. He didn't interrupt. When she finished, she didn't look at him. She just folded her hands. I thought I would die there. That no one would care. That even if I escaped, I'd still be worthless. You're not, he said, his tone steady. I know that now, she replied. Later, after she dressed in one of the patched thermal cloaks he gave her, she asked to help him with a repair. The ship's lower vents were blocked from heat cycling. He guided her through the tools, showed her how to reconnect the intake hoses. She learned quickly. That night, they ate across from each other. Quiet. Not tense. Just quiet. At one point, she asked, what did you do before this? Systems tech. 12 years. Navy Corps. Did my job. Then I left. Why? Because one day I saw something wrong. And I didn't stop it. She looked at him. But you stopped for me. He nodded. Yeah, I did. She didn't ask for more. Before sleep, she paused at the doorway to the sleeping area. Then said, thank you for calling me by a name. He answered without turning around. Thank you for remembering it. The door closed behind her. And for the first time in years, Darren felt the weight in his chest shift. Not disappear. Not heal. But move. She wasn't healed either. But she was alive. And tomorrow, they'd both take another step towards something they hadn't dared imagine. A future. The warning came during mid-cycle diagnostics. Darren had set the Skimmer 12 into a low-energy drift path across the shadow of Jorvin 6, using the moon's gravity to mask their signal while rerouting power to recharge the jump core. It was routine, safe, calculated. Then the proximity sensor blinked red. He sat up straight, pulled the data overlay. A ship had entered the outer range, small, fast, untagged. Not a mining vessel. No beacon. No declared route. It was skimming low across the moon's surface, quiet, sharp, purposeful. "Say, Lyra," he called, already at the helm. "Get strapped in." Now, she emerged from the sleeping bay, still tugging her patched thermal cloak over one shoulder. "What is it?" "Someone scanning. No ID broadcast. They're looking for something." She stopped. "You think it's them?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Darren shut down the NAV lights and redirected power to propulsion, keeping the ship in passive mode. They couldn't outrun a tracker ship in raw speed, but he could hide if he had time. The stealth modulator was crude but functional, built from an old recon drone he'd stripped months ago. He activated it, then looked at her. "They haven't locked onto us yet. But if they do, we can't stay here." She stood still, gripping the edge of the console, her jaw tight. "I don't want to go back in a cage." "You won't." He pulled up the emergency NAV chart. There was a blind corridor between Jorvan 6 and its twin moon, Trassel Minor, a belt of ice debris and magnetic field noise. Dangerous, unmapped, but perfect for hiding. He set the course and throttled up. The ship hummed, smooth at first, then juddered as it hit atmosphere resistance. Behind them, the scanner showed the unknown vessel adjusting trajectory. "Faster now. Tracking. Confirmed." "They saw us," he muttered. Sailira sat in the co-pilot's seat, tense but composed. The stars blurred as the ship pushed through the upper debris ring. Darren shifted power to shields. Ice fragments glanced off the hull with sharp thuds. The controls bucked in his hands. He looked at her just once. Her hand was braced against the console, her knuckles white, but her breathing was steady. "I can help," she said. "You are," he replied. The tracker ship didn't fire. Not yet. That was worse. It meant they were trying to disable, not destroy. Slavers didn't want corpses. They wanted product. Darren rerouted the engine heat into the secondary exhaust vent, a trick that could fool thermal sensors for a few minutes. The skimmer ducked low, diving under a dense cluster of rotating debris. Then the ping stopped. No signal. No trace. Gone. They held position. Silent. Waiting. 2 minutes passed. Then 5. Sailira didn't speak. She just stared at the viewport, lips pressed together. Finally, Darren exhaled. "I think we lost them." She didn't relax. Not yet. But her shoulders dropped just slightly. He turned the ship toward Trassel Minor's shadow and locked in a cold drift orbit. No engines, no signature. It was only when everything was silent again that she spoke. They knew where to look. He looked at her. "You think it was the last buyer?" "No," she said quietly. "The ones before him. The ones who kept records. They marked me with a sigil tattoo. That's how they track lineage compatibility. But they also embed tags." She pulled the edge of her suit down just enough to expose the lower curve of her abdomen, just above the hip bone. There, under the skin, a faint raised node. Almost invisible. Darren leaned in, jaw tight. "You knew." "I suspected. Why didn't you say anything?" Her voice didn't waver. "Because I wasn't sure you'd still want me aboard." Darren stood slowly, walked to the med station, pulled the surgical scanner from the wall, and set it to surface depth. He knelt beside her. "Lie back," he said. "We're taking it out. Now." She hesitated, just for a second, then followed the instruction without resistance. The scanner hummed, highlighting the embedded chip. He sterilized the extractor and pressed it to her skin. She flinched, more from memory than pain. The chip came free with a short buzz. He dropped it into a containment vial, sealed it, and placed it into the ship's waste incinerator. Gone. She sat up slowly, holding her side. He gave her water, then sat beside her. Neither of them spoke. After a moment, she said, "You didn't hesitate." "Not once." Her voice dropped. "Most would." "I'm not most." She turned her head slightly to face him. "Why are you doing this?" He thought about it, then answered simply, "Because someone should have done it for my sister, and they didn't." That silenced her. But her hand moved, hesitant, trembling, and touched his. Not out of gratitude, not out of fear, but because it felt like the right moment to close the distance. He didn't pull away. She leaned her head against his shoulder, eyes closed. They sat like that for a long time. No words, just breathing. Just the low hum of the ship as it drifted in silence, between stars and threats, in the frozen dark. When they finally moved, it wasn't because they had to. It was because the worst had passed for now. And what remained between them was no longer just survival. It was choice. The Skimmer 12 drifted in dead space for 2 days, hidden in the shadow of Trassel Minor. No pings, no signals, no movement across the long-range sensors. Darren kept them in cold sleep orbit, systems minimal, heat emissions buried beneath static from the ice field. It was the safest they'd been since the scrapyard. Inside, time slowed, not in the physical sense, but in the way it settled between two people who had stopped running. Darren ran ship checks every few hours. The systems held. Fuel remained steady. He didn't need to speak unless something changed. He didn't mind the silence. Salira moved through the ship now with familiarity. She no longer hesitated before opening doors or entering shared space. She helped prepare meals, repaired a coolant line after watching Darren do it once, and she kept brushing her hair, something he noticed only because it had become smooth again, falling clean past her shoulders like a curtain of black silk. On the third evening, she found him in the storage bay, sorting through scrap insulation foam and carbon tape. He was working under a dim light, stripped down to his vest, arms marked with old burns and fresh bruises from their recent evasive maneuvers. "I want to fix my suit," she said, holding the damaged stem layer. "I want to do it myself." He nodded, said nothing, handed her the kit. They worked side by side for nearly an hour, sharing a square of floor surrounded by crates and unbolted panels. She didn't ask for help, and he didn't offer unless she needed a tool. At one point, she paused, fingers pressing into the fabric. "Does this place feel different to you?" He looked over. "The ship." She shook her head. "No. I mean, being here. Not moving. Not hiding. Just existing." Darren sat back, stretched his legs. "It's quiet. I like quiet," she said. Then, after a breath, she added, "I didn't know if I would." She continued stitching, eyes on her work. "Do you think people can forget what they've been trained to expect?" He didn't answer immediately. "I think they can learn something new," he said, "if they're given time. And safety." Salira nodded. "You never looked at me the way they did." He didn't look at her now, either. "Because I see a person, not a product." That silence returned again, solid, full of meaning. She finished patching the final seam, tested the elasticity, then leaned against the crate beside him. "I want to tell you something, and I don't want you to tell me it's okay." Darren turned his head slightly. "I'm still afraid," she said. "Every morning, I wake up and think the door will be locked again. Every time you're quiet, I think I did something wrong." She wasn't crying. She wasn't trembling. She was just telling the truth. He nodded. "Then I'll keep showing you you're safe. Until it sticks." I want it to stick. She turned to him now, fully. Her eyes were calm, but searching. "I want to choose something," she said. "Not because I have to. Because I can." He said nothing, watching her closely. Salira leaned forward, slowly. There was no hesitation in her body now. Only care, only intention. Her hand touched his arm, then his chest, and when she leaned in further, her forehead touched his. He breathed in deeply. His hand stayed at his sides, tense, not out of resistance, but restraint. Not because he didn't want her, because he did. And he didn't want to be one more person who took something without permission. "You don't owe me this," he whispered. "I know," she said. "That's why I'm offering it." He kissed her, not with hunger, but with reverence. His hand rose to her cheek, warm, solid. Her fingers curled in his shirt, holding him close. Their bodies moved slowly, carefully, like learning a language without words. When he lifted her into his lap, she didn't flinch. When she undid the clasps of her cloak, she did it herself. And when he touched her skin, he did so with a kind of restraint that made her tremble, not from fear, but from being seen. They made love quietly, in the soft heat of the storage bay floor, where insulation foam still lay scattered around them like cast-off armor. Every movement was mutual, every breath matched, every moment earned. Afterward, she lay against his chest, fingers drawing small shapes on the curve of his shoulder. "No one ever asked what I wanted," she said. "You don't have to answer to anyone again," he told her. "Not even me." She tilted her head, kissed the side of his neck, and said, "That's why I trust you." Later, they didn't talk much. They didn't need to. They ate together, cleaned up the tools, and folded her repaired suit neatly beside the sleeping bay. That night, she didn't close the door behind her. And in the middle of the night, she came back to him. No fear in her step, no shame in her voice, just a quiet request. "Can I sleep next to you tonight?" He moved over without a word, lifted the thermal blanket, and welcomed her in. The stars outside didn't blink. The systems didn't fail. No alarm sounded. For the first time, neither of them dreamed of cages. 3 days later, the Skimmer 12 received a transmission Darren hadn't expected and didn't want. It was a bounce signal, distorted and low band, piggybacking on a dead satellite array near the center drift. No ID header, just a string of numbers and a voice fragment buried in static. Lot designations confirmed, relocation manifest, transit hub active. Darren froze mid-step. He replayed it 3 times, ran it through the scrubber. Boosted clarity. The signal was old, maybe 2 weeks, but the coordinates were real. And the message was clear. Someone was still moving girls like Celira. A holding station, possibly a market node, still operational. He didn't tell her right away. She found him at the console, hunched forward, jaw tight, eyes locked to the screen. He didn't hear her come in until her hand rested gently on his shoulder. "What is it?" He turned the display off. "Too late. I heard something," she said. He looked up at her, then made a choice. "No lies. I intercepted a transmission. It came from the drift sector east of Varnal Outpost. A relay point. There's still moving people. Ones like you." She didn't blink. "How many?" "I don't know." "What do they do there?" "I'm guessing intake. Short-term holding. Before redistribution." She stepped back. "And you were going to go alone." "I was thinking about it." "No," she said. Her voice was clear, unshaking. "You were going to leave me behind." Darren stood. "Not because I don't trust you. Because it's dangerous." "I know danger," she snapped. "I've lived in it longer than you've known me. And I'm not going to sit on this ship while someone else waits in a cage." He stared at her. This wasn't the woman from the cage anymore. This wasn't the girl who whispered for warmth. "I need you to be sure," he said. "Not out of guilt. Not because you think you have to pay something back." "I'm sure," she said. "Because it has to stop with me." He looked down once, hands on his hips, jaw clenched. Then he nodded. By nightfall, the ship was in motion. The Skimmer 12 left Trassel Shadow and made for the unregistered drift lane. Darren routed power to calm scramblers and weapons, makeshift but functional. Celira checked their medkits, ammo clips, and 2 stunners she'd never touched until now. He showed her how to fire one. She didn't miss the target even once. When they reached the coordinates, the station came into view, an old industrial dock wedged into a half-broken asteroid shell. Its external lights were off, minimal emissions, invisible to most scans, but not to Darren's tools. They approached in silence, docking manually. The airlock groaned open. Inside, the air was cold and dry. Metal corridors stretched in multiple directions, each lined with surveillance lenses, most broken. But cameras weren't what he was worried about. They moved together. Celira's steps were soundless, focused. The first door they opened led to a holding room, empty, abandoned. Crates stacked in the corners, most labeled with biometric tags. A set of cuffs bolted into the wall. Celira didn't flinch. They pressed deeper. On the second floor, past a broken containment gate, they found them. 3 girls. Young, malnourished. 2 asleep, 1 awake and staring at the wall. All wearing ID tags like the one Celira used to bear. She knelt down slowly, spoke softly. "It's okay. You're not property." The girl didn't react. Darren kept watch at the door. When footsteps echoed down the hall, he raised his stunner, heart rate steady. A man entered the corridor. Mid-40s. Civilian clothing. No weapons visible. He looked at Darren, then past him. His eyes widened. "You brought one of them," he said. "You brought her back?" Darren fired once. The stun bolt dropped mid-sentence. They moved fast after that. Salira tore the tags off each girl herself. Her hands didn't shake. When one of them cried, she held her. When the other stirred, she spoke low but firm. Darren loaded them into the emergency pod in the hangar, a tight fit but safe. I can route this to a border patrol station, he said. They'll get medical care. Real papers. I have a contact. Salira looked back at the station one last time. Then she reached in her own belt, pulled out the vial. The one with her tracking chip inside. She crushed it beneath her boot. You said it had to be burned, she whispered. He understood. Without hesitation, he opened the auxiliary fuel valve, dropped a flare stick into the leaking compartment, and hit the remote. They watched from orbit as the station went up, silent, brilliant, clean. Inside the skimmer, the rescued girls slept in the rear compartment, wrapped in blankets. Safe. Salira stood at the viewport, arms crossed, jaw firm. Darren stepped beside her. You okay? She looked at him. No, but I'm free. He placed his hand gently on her back. She didn't move away. You saved them, he said. We did. Then softly, and on go home now. Wherever that is. He turned to face her. Then let's find one. Her hand found his. No hesitation this time. And together, they left the wreckage behind. The green moon was nameless. It didn't appear on any standard charts. No mining claims. No habitation zones. Just a breathable atmosphere, stable gravity, and enough open land to vanish for good. Darren found it by accident. An old survey ping buried in his Navy archives, never followed up. That made it perfect. The Skimmer 12 touched down on a flat shelf of stone, flanked by mossy cliffs and wide plains streaked with patches of bluegrass. The air smelled like damp leaves and sun-warmed soil. No machine hum, no alarms, just wind. Clean, real. Salira stepped out of the ship first. She wore the long desert cloak they'd salvaged weeks ago, now cleaned, tailored, and clasped with a metal pin Darren had fixed himself. Beneath it, the stitched stim suit fit her body like a second skin. But it was the way she stood, shoulders back, chin high, that made the difference. She walked to the edge of shallow ridge and looked out. No fences, no walls, no containment field, just open sky. Darren followed. His jacket was slung over one shoulder, boots dusted with landing soot. He stopped beside her, squinting against the pale sunlight. His body still ached from the last fight, but he hadn't felt this clear in years. Feels different, he said quietly. It's not silent, Salira replied. It's quiet. He glanced over. She was barefoot. Her toes dug into the moss. Her eyes glinted. We can build something here, she said. Not a shelter. A home. Darren nodded. We'll need a generator, a water rig, perimeter cams. We'll need time, she said. We have it. Later, he unpacked the emergency prefab unit and began laying out the basics. Fuel cell, comm relay, filtration mesh. She didn't stand back. She helped. By sundown, they had a roof, 3 walls, and a temporary heat grid. Inside, it was still rough, but warm. She found the old compass necklace tucked beneath his shirt. She didn't ask about it, just touched it once. I want to plant something, she said. I want to wake up and see it grow. Darren didn't speak for a moment. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out a small pouch of dormant seed pods, Survivor Flora from his Navy supply kit, meant for harsh worlds. Try these, he said. They're stubborn. Like you. She smiled, faint but real. That night, they didn't make love because of pain or relief. They didn't seek each other out in desperation. It happened slowly, naturally. A touch, a glance, a shared warmth beneath a salvaged thermal sheet. They kissed under flickering battery lantern light, clothes half shed, skin against skin, no tension, no shame, just the need to be, with no watching eyes, no names burned into flesh, no debt. When he touched her body, she guided his hands. When she moved over him, he whispered her name, once low, reverent. Salira. In the morning, he woke first. She was already outside, kneeling in the moss. Her cloak hung from her shoulders, and her hair was tied back. She had dug a small trench with her bare hands. She planted the first seeds. When he approached, she looked up. I want to stay here, she said. We will. I want to grow old here. We can. She stood, took his hand, brought it to her belly. I don't know yet, she whispered, but I think I might be. And if I am, I want this child to be born in a place that isn't about fear. Darren didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He just wrapped his arms around her and held her there, anchored, present, real. No one chased them now. No one controlled their future. The cage was gone. The names they'd been given, Lot, 12, the traitor Tech, the broken woman, the discarded man, meant nothing anymore. Only this did. She stood beside him. Not behind, not beneath, beside. And when they turned to walk back toward the small home they had started to build, their hands remained clasped. They never let go. The green moon had settled into their bones. The days passed quietly now, not with urgency, but with rhythm. Darren and Celira had established a routine. Mornings began with field checks and maintenance, afternoons with expansion, walls reinforced, solar grids installed, a new filtration unit carved into the slope behind their shelter. Evenings belonged to themselves. The prefab shelter had transformed. Panels from the skimmer, 12, now reinforced the roof. Vents circulated clean, warmed air. A sleeping space, a kitchen corner, and a water station all fit within the modest interior. But it was the little things that made it theirs: cloth wall hangings Celira stitched by hand, a table built from scavenged metal beams, a single flower blooming in a glass jar above the window. They no longer spoke in short phrases or cautious tones. Their conversations had deepened, slow, full of space and shared thought. Celira spent more time outside each day. The small field she cleared was now a grid of low-growing greens, adapted to the soil with Darren's help. The plants were hardy. Some refused to die, even when she forgot to water them. I like them, she said once. They're stubborn. So are you, he answered. She grinned. That's how I made it out. It was on a windless morning, 2 weeks after they'd burned the outpost, that she sat with Darren beneath the low awning and took his hand in both of hers. I'm pregnant, she said, quiet but sure. He didn't freeze. He didn't panic. He looked at her, and his first words were, "Are you afraid?" "Yes," she said, "but not like before." He squeezed her fingers. "Do you want this?" She nodded once. "With you?" "Yes, I do." Darren had never pictured himself as a father. Not after the war, not after the silence of space and the endless drift from one broken station to another. But looking at her, at the certainty in her eyes, the peace in her voice, he didn't see a burden. He saw a future. The next day, he began expanding the shelter by hand, cut new beams, rerouted energy for a second room, built stronger supports for weatherproofing. She watched him from the garden bed, arms around her middle. "I'm not fragile," she reminded him. "I know," he said, "but you deserve protection anyway." She cooked more now, learned how to use the old heat coil unit without burning the bottom of the pan. One evening, as they sat by the solar lamp eating stew and laughing over a failed attempt at flatbread, she suddenly leaned against him and whispered, "You know, I still wake up sometimes and expect to be locked in." He turned to her slowly. "But I never feel it for long," she said, "because I always find you next to me." That night, they lay in the dark, her body pressed close to his, her palm resting low on her belly. His arm was wrapped around her back, his breathing steady. No words were spoken, but everything that needed to be said lived in that silence. In the weeks that followed, they repaired more than machinery. They repaired themselves. Darren began smiling more. He laughed without hesitation. He kissed her in the garden without needing a reason. Celira hummed when she worked. She began writing again, scratching notes on salvaged tablet glass, sketching out what she wanted their home to become. She'd already picked a name, but hadn't told him yet. She was waiting until it felt right. One morning, after light rain, she stood barefoot in the garden soil and called to him through the open door. "Come here." He stepped out, wiping grease from his hands. She pointed to a green shoot breaking through the soil. "That one wasn't supposed to grow," she said. "It was dead. It was in the wrong place. And it still found a way up." He didn't speak. He just came beside her and looked down at the stubborn sprout. "Like us," she said. He slid an arm around her waist. She leaned into him, soft and warm. And for a long time, they stood there, not watching for threats, not remembering pain, just breathing. Together. It was not a perfect world, but it was theirs, and nothing would take it from them.